It must seem crazy what I'm about to say. This book right here makes everything okay. It's like the sun in the sky is shining down on me. Once you learn to read, baby, you will be forever free. Clap along if you feel like reading up on the roof. Clap along if you feel like reading can bring you truth. Clap along if you know what reading really means to you. Clap along if you feel like reading's what you want to do. With a book in my hand, I can go anywhere. Baby, if you're lucky, maybe I'll share. Well, I should probably warn you, I'm the reading kind. No need for TV, don't waste my time. Here's why. Because I'm reading. Clap along if you feel like reading up on the roof. Clap along if you feel like reading can bring you truth. Clap along if you know what reading really means to you. Clap along if you feel like reading's what you want to do. Fiction books filled with imagination. Fiction books, they take me away. Non-fiction books filled with information. Non-fiction books, they take me away. Fiction books filled with imagination. Fiction books, they take me away. Non-fiction books filled with information. Non-fiction books, I said, because I'm reading. Clap along if you feel like reading up on a roof. Clap along if you feel like reading can bring you truth. Clap along if you know what reading really means to you. Clap along if you feel like reading's what you want to do. Clap along if you feel like reading up on the roof. Clap along if you feel like reading can bring you truth. Clap along if you know what reading really means to you. Clap along if you feel like reading's what you want to do. Fiction books filled with imagination. Fiction books, they take me away. Non-fiction books filled with information. Non-fiction books, I said, because I'm reading. Clap along if you feel like reading up on the roof. Clap along if you feel like reading can bring you truth. Clap along if you know what reading really means to you. Clap along if you feel like reading's what you want to do. Clap along if you feel like reading up on the roof. Clap along if you feel like reading can bring you truth. Clap along if you know what reading really means to you. Yeah. Clap along if you feel like reading's what you want to do.
I'm Ken Weene. Unfortunately, my wonderful co-host, Monica Brinkman, cannot be with us today, but I do have two guests, and I'm going to ask them each to very quickly introduce themselves because I have to tend to Party. You folks may not know Party yet, but Party is a very special moose, and he comes on to discuss certain things like today's topic, which is children's books, how to write for children, what children need to read, want to read, and all those kind of good questions. So, Ellen, why don't you introduce yourself while Party and I have a quick conference?
Okay, I'm happy to do that. I'm so pleased to be here. What I do is I write for young children in order to encourage empathy, and that is the Charlie Chameleon series. And I also am in the process of writing for young adults. So that's a completely different, and that would be historical fiction and also some fantasy. And I have with me my friend Tim. So Tim's going to say hi.
Hello.
Well, he gets very excited when other stuffed animals and puppets are around.
Oh, hello, buddy. How you doing? Hello, everybody. Glad to see you.
You know,
different here than school.
Tim,
Yes.
the nice lady who brought you didn't tell people her name. So tell her her.
Oh, no. Her name, I'll let her say.
My name is L Buikema. Thank you, Tim.
Yes, no problem.
And she is somebody that I personally have known for many years because we were almost neighbors in Phoenix for years. Now she lives in Texas, outside of San Antonio, where she and Tim and her husband Ralph can go to visit the Alamo and the Riverwalk and good, cool things like that.
Yes, and try to go swim in the river.
And swim.
Sometimes.
There you go. And our other guest is, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Gretchen Carlson, and I write middle grade from age 10 to 14 readers, and I write historical fiction. I like to make history come alive, and I write from true stories. So my present manuscript is about a 12-year-old who has taken on the responsibility of getting electricity wired up and connected to her farm home. And yet she has to overcome a lot of obstacles and crazy people who stand in her way.
Well, that book is in a long tradition of American literature. When I was a kid, I remember, for example, reading Johnny Tremain.
Mm-hmm. Right. This is like 1939, 1940, when a lot of things that we take for granted today did not exist, like indoor plumbing, at least for some parts of the country. And so this girl is in the Midwest, and her farm family is very poor, coming out of the Depression and living in a very different era where kids had a lot of adult responsibilities on them. And it was hard, a lot of hardships. But at the same time, many of them overcame and truly were heroes for their family.
Yeah, I think that I think for a while in this country, and maybe both of you ladies have a view on this, but I think for a long time in this country, we went too strong into childhood, and we took away the growing up part, the having responsibilities. It was almost like children were supposed to become like pet poodles or something, and no, never a pet moose, no. And they really only more recently, I think we're seeing a swing back where we're seeing kids coming on like on the public media, like television and stuff, and these kids are accomplishing things. And I think there's a return to the belief that, yes, a kid should be a kid, but a kid also should have goals and set personal expectations so I think it's a different view of growing up as a child and not just being a child, but it's still, but it is this idea that a kid today, we really think of a kid today more as being, as they were in that period of time, having responsibility, taking more. What do you think?
I tend to agree with you. And one thing I wanted to mention when I was writing historical fiction, the Hobo Code, which is, I'm still working on that one. When I would bring it to critique group, which is something that I find very, very valuable, I would hear, well, would they really be doing that much? Would they really be having that kind of responsibilities? And that started this book starts in 1905. So they really did. It was a much different life had many more chores, more responsibilities. It was very different than it is now. And I kind of wonder if with our pandemic, if that has been part of the catalyst for the change with more responsibility, because so much has changed with that.
I think it was before that, but I certainly think the pandemic is changing our view of family. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things I'm very aware of, well, I am a therapist, a psychotherapist, and I have worked a lot with children over the years. And one of the things that I have noticed is that kids who feel some responsibility for the rest of the world, the rest of the family, to be more able to handle the stresses. Like, a kid who I like one family I work with, and they have, the family is the broken family. The father raises chickens, the mother raises quail. They both funny, but the fact is that these kids are helping to take care of the animals. And just that difference of saying, well, yeah, I take care of the animals. I help gather the eggs. I help this. I help that. Makes them much more prepared to deal with stress and release stress, because they say, well, my job is to handle things rather than, mommy, I'm sick.
Well, apropos of that, the very first Charlie Chameleon books is called The Adventures of Charlie Chameleon, New Beginnings. And the very first thing they find out that Papa has a new job. They're going to be moving to a new town. They're going to be moving closer to their grandparents. So that was a good thing. But, you have to leave your friends. Everything is going to be changing. And to make things a little easier for Charlie and to give him a feeling of owning the move, his parents had him box up part of his room. And so, and that's something that I had read earlier, and something I wish I had done with my own children when we were making our moves. When you're a parent, and there's a lot of mistakes that you make along the way, because none of us is perfect. Nobody comes with a
instruction booklet. Is that what you want to say?
Yes.
Yes.
So no instruction booklet. Thank you, Tim. And so it makes a big difference when you have you're part of it, and that's good for them. They feel important, and that's makes the move easier for everybody all around, I think.
Well, as somebody who, when my parents moved, they gave me a post box address and left. Literally. I have to say, I think the idea of telling you to box up your room, and of course, Charlie Chameleon has a very great responsibility because he has a fish.
Oh, Frankie, world's most obnoxious goldfish.
Yes.
He means well, but he's
terror. Oh yes, the terror.
He likes to splash people and things like that.
He does.
Okay.
He
And
definitely does.
somebody just joined us. Hi, Rita. Thank you for joining in. I'm Ken. And who are you?
I'm Rita Toma. I'm a friend of Ellen.
Yes.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Sorry, it took me a while to get on.
Not a problem. So, Gretchen, you also write, and do you think that it's important to help kids develop a sense of responsibility early on and control in their lives?
Well, definitely, and I think kids do have that innate sense in which they really desire to find their place and have and contribute to their family. I think a lot of children have that, no matter what era. But the thing I love about children's books is that it allows children to think, I'm not the only one who has felt this way. I'm not the only one who has had, my parents have moved, like what you were saying, Ellen, about, Charlie the Chameleon, or in my case, I'm not the only one whose family is very, very poor and can hardly make it, and I have to provide. I love it how books can come alongside a child so that they realize that maybe they discover tools of how the character solved their problems, through a book, but also just that sense of I'm not the only one whose this life has unfolded this way.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's very important. Books help us to understand the broader world, but they also help us to feel that we're part of that broader world.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. Now,
interestingly, when I was a kid, as I was telling Ellen and Gretchen before the show, I had an adult library card when I was in like 3rd grade. And I was reading things like Steinbeck and Dos Passos and Sinclair Lewis. And yes, I know that makes me weird. But I'm concerned with social issues back then. I don't know why, but I was. But I think that's the other thing. Children want to know. I think that's one of the most fascinating things to me, that so many parents, and I have to say even teachers, really don't understand that children read out of curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Curious about a particular problem or facing a problem is, for example, with Ellen's latest book, in which Charlie, the comedian, is dealing with a bully. And, how do you deal with bullying? Sometimes, though, it could be problems that really we're not connected to personally, and yet for some reason speak to us. I think historical fiction, often, for example, is particularly powerful because we are wondering how something came to be, how it was, what it was like. So, I think children are very inquiring. They want to know. I recently had the pleasure of taking a kid to one of the botanical gardens here in Tucson. And this kid is like 9 years old. And I thought, oh, he's going to kind of run through the way kids sometimes do. And this kid is a reader. And he stopped to read every sign in that garden and think about it. And why did they put that sign here and things like that? I mean, it was really a great pleasure walking through this garden with this kid. But, he was looking to learn in his way. He was very inquiring. Now, another kid you might take that same place and he'll dart from place to place like a hummingbird. And you think he hasn't seen a thing. And then you're on the way out. They'll start talking to you. Oh, did you see this?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, wait a minute, when did you do this?
I was thinking about another aspect of children's books, and that's the actual reading itself. Because sometimes you're going to have parents or older siblings reading with the children, or children reading to their older siblings because they're practicing, and there's the closeness that's involved and the interaction that happens. And as far as I'm concerned, reading to a child is the second best thing to a hug.
Okay. I vote for the reading ahead of the hug, because and I'll tell you what, my wife, I don't read well to children. I read well to adults, but I don't read well to children. My wife reads well to children, and when she would read to our grandkids, it was just wonderful to watch her. And there was something communicated from the face when you're reading, and your face mirrors the emotionality and the meaning of what you're reading. There is a connection there that is just beautiful to behold. I keep trying to get her to read to me, but she'll read to Party. If I get Party up on the bed, she'll read him a bedtime story, but she doesn't read to me.
Oh, that's just not fair.
Isn't? Tim? Do you read to Tim, Ellen?
She never reads to me. Tim's sad.
Poor Tim.
I know.
Well, so who was when you were, Rita, do you have children?
I do. They're older. I have 8 grandchildren, though.
Do you read to your grandchildren?
I'm not there all the time. They're in Canada, but there is one family that, because he's in French immersion, I will read him the English books.
Wow.
So, so he can enjoy that.
And he's learning to speak French.
Yes.
Ah. Ooh la la. I just exhausted my supply of French.
It's so good to speak more than one language. Your thinking is more flexible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Gretchen, when you're writing, what language besides English do you try and incorporate, if any?
Well, I'm not in this particular novel, but I did study Spanish, and I actually have taught Spanish, elementary through high school. So, but this particular, I've written some poems, nothing longer than a poem in Spanish. But I agree, Ellen. It's a good physical stretch for our brains. However, I am writing specifically to an English audience, and I do love reading. We live fairly close to 2 grandchildren, and boy, I'll tell you what, I scour the library. One is a very reluctant reader, a little boy. He's 2nd grade he's 3rd grade going into 4th. But I'll find anything that can spark his interest. And right now it's the Dog Man series, which is probably not my favorite, but it's popular and it's caught his eye. And this is interesting. We started reading the Dog Man series books at the very beginning of his 3rd grade year, and at the end of his year, his teacher tested that his reading comprehension and reading ability skills had really significantly raised. And he said, "Oh, well, you can thank Dog Man for that."
I think that's a very important point you're raising there. That what do we give kids to read? I think personally that the most important thing is that it has to be what the kid wants to learn about.
It's got to meet their needs and their interests. It's got to spark that interest. Otherwise, it's a dull book that they'll just ignore and put it aside. Or even if you're reading it to them, they're just not into it.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we feel like, oh, we're going to pick the books, and we pick very good books. Like, there are some wonderful children's books. I think right now of The Giving Tree, one of my favorite of all time books. It's a lovely, lovely book, but it's only a book that's suitable for people who want to read it. If you don't want to read it.
Not mistakenly, but I had all the Nancy Drew books and all the Bobbsey Twins and all the Boxcar Children. I had all those books from my childhood that I saved them for that day that I could read them to my grandchildren. Lo and behold, I opened up those books and they felt boring because there were all these he said, she said. It was written far more passive sentence structures. It just was not, it was what we read in those days does not catch the attention of today's children. And so therefore they're all on eBay. It's like my grandkids are not enjoying or appreciating these books. It's like, okay, let's move it on. Let's move on. But it's interesting. Literature has changed and continues to change very quickly. And we need to keep up with what will connect with, specific children.
Well, I have some hints for teachers and who may be watching this, and parents who might be watching this. When I taught very young children and parents would come in for parent-teacher conferences, I always set aside a little bit of information for them on what kind of books in the classroom the children were drawn to, so they would know what type of books to pick up for them in the library or, you know, for personal use. One dad in particular came and he says, no, I want my son to be reading more, and he's not reading more. I says, well, you know what? He loves sharks and anything to do with the sea. And I showed him what he had been reading, and that's what they did. And if you have a child, like you say, that you're only going to read what you want to read, you can't force them to read something that's not of their interest. So if you give something that, like, oh, this is so cool, or you know, let them go through the bookstore and see what appeals to them, and let them actually purchase the book, you know, that would be ownership, and that's a good thing too.
So visiting a bookstore is certainly one of the great things to do with a kid. And yes, they do pick. By the way, sometimes parents worry that the content in a book might be, you know, too sophisticated, to use a, you know. Now, like Potty, you know, he likes to read stuff that's, well, you know, you wouldn't actually think of a moose. You know, you'd think a moose would like to read about forests and things like that. And he likes to read about life in the big city. And there are those people who think, well, gee, can he understand it? And here's what I've learned, not just about Potty, but about kids. They understand what they're ready to understand.
Mm-hmm.
If you read with them or watch a movie with them or whatever it is, they will ask you questions that they are prepared to learn the answers to. They may come back to the same book. How many of us have read the same book more than once?
Oh, absolutely, many times.
And
many.
each time, you know, you take something new away, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think especially when we're talking about, you know, instead of saying, no, you're too young, say, okay, let's try it. And we read it together. And that's the other thing. A lot of parents, they say, oh, I want my kid to read. And then what are you doing while your kid is reading? Oh, I'm watching television. I'm watching football, or I'm watching, you know, whatever. And you really think your kid is going to learn to appreciate reading that way. So one of the keys to me is not just reading to your kid, but reading with your kid.
Absolutely.
So you can read, even sometimes take turns reading the same thing, you know, like you read a page, then I'll read a page, or you read this chapter, then I'll read the next chapter, and we'll read aloud to each other. Involving the kid in that process helps the kid to understand the whole reading. Of course, that means that mom and dad have to be unreluctant readers.
Or have time. I'll push back on that. I watch my daughter-in-laws, and they are so busy trying to keep everything going. They don't have the time to read all of the books that their kids are, especially as the kids get older, you know, and the books are longer. And so I have one granddaughter who can just race through books. And so what I would suggest for those parents is there's a lot of good websites that give recommendations or book reviews. I think it's wise for parents to stay on top of books when they don't have enough time, but there are some books out there in the YA especially that, wow, I'm not sure if I would want my granddaughters reading some of this or my grandsons reading some of this yet. It's getting touchy and dicey with some of the different social issues and different perspectives that some parents are not. Let's face it, some parents don't want their kids reading some of the content. It's more than just a sense of violence or darkness. There are issues that are being suggested. And so I believe that parents, they need to say, yes, read, but it is wise to at least keep an eye on some of the book reviews of the books that their children are reading. And this is for the older readers.
I think you're absolutely right. The problem is, though, that when you say to a child who's ready to read on their own that way, well, I don't think you're ready for this book. That's a perfect way to make sure they read the book.
Absolutely.
Right. It is. I
I think if you read a review and the book is taking a position you don't agree with, I think you should let the kid read the book, but say, I really want to talk to you about my views on this issue. I'm not saying parents should abrogate their authority or responsibility. I am saying that they have to be prepared to have meaningful dialogue with their children.
Which means they better read the book.
Well, or at least read a few informed reviews. If you don't have time to read the whole book, you can read a little bit of the book, you can read some reviews, and you can at least know what the major issue that people are talking about. But there are, and certainly one of the things we also have to realize, and I think this is part of what you're talking about, kids today are in a place that's very different than they were back then. I have a friend that I get on Skype with every couple of weeks, and we go back to summer camp together. Okay, I mean, we were talking the other day about, how the world has changed. Now, we're two AKs, and we're talking about, back then, I mean, what the heck was homosexuality was like, and who the heck had ever heard of transgender or anything like that? And now we have this whole alphabet of difference, and we have to realize that the world is changing. But what's more important is what we have to do is realize that kids are changing because they're in that changing world. And I know this one family where the oldest child is identified as transgender. And about a year and a half ago, came out as, I don't want to be called my male name. I want to be called by my female, and I'm a girl in my heart. I'm my soul. I'm a girl, and I want, And I watched the two younger children in the family deal with this.
Mm.
And, Mom is trying her best. And she, most of the time, remembers that she now has this daughter and uses the female pronoun. And Dad is trying his best, but not quite as well. But the kids, they now have a sister. That's all. So, and one of them says, well, I like it when my sister plays video games with me. And it's just absolutely not
Easier for them.
Slightest issue for these kids, because they are living in a world in which gender fluidity is an accepted thing. And, I think we have to realize that in many ways, the things that we get hung up on because it's just totally foreign to it. The kids are able, and I remember, one of the best moments in my career, and this goes back a long way, I had a group of boys who were like 7th, 8th grade, and one boy decided to quit the group. And, the other kids said, well, can we go talk to him? I said, yeah, well, I set it up. And they said, look, if you want to leave because you don't want to be in the group, that's cool. You're still our friend. We like you, but you're free. But if the reason you're leaving is because you're gay, we've known that all along. What the hell difference does it make? And the kid, like, you knew? And of course, everybody knew. I knew too, but I mean, it just wasn't discussed because it never came up. And so after that, they started discussing what it meant to be gay, and how it affected him. And they saw him through the next year of school, supporting him. And I was very proud of those kids. But the thing was, I was battling at my own, to be honest, I was battling in my own soul. How do I get this? How do I bring this up? How do I talk about this with this group? They didn't care. They honestly just didn't care. It was my problem, not theirs. They just, they just understood that because society is changing. We're changing, don't you think?
So then it became a non-issue, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Ellen, what are some other issues that your books address? I know that Charlie the Chameleon addresses change and bullies. What are the other issues?
The overarching issue is empathy. And I wanted to find a way to get that across without browbeating anybody. I also have a lot of humor in the stories, that they were written specifically for parents who are reading it to find something in it that was funny, as well as the children reading it that was funny. And for the older siblings who really are too old to read it but wanted to read it because it was funny, so the only way they can do it is to read it to a younger sibling and feel that it's okay. That happened too. That actually, I got a note from a parent that I thought that was pretty cute. My daughter's reading this, and she's reading it to her younger sibling, but I think she's doing it just because she wants to read the book, because she likes the books. I included all kinds of activities in them that were, you know, grade appropriate, age appropriate, and I had several wonderful opportunities to take them to libraries when I was living in the Phoenix area, to school libraries, and I found that even the sixth grade boys liked the Charlie Chameleon stories. Part of it, though, I think, are the secret codes in there. Oh. And I sometimes wonder how many secret codes they did of their own. But I did these. Bullying is a big issue, and it's forever. It's been going on forever, and I don't know if there will ever be a cure for it, if there is such a thing, because it's a personality issues too. But you're not born when things happen. So in the second book, in School Days, I found a way to show that the classroom bully was being bullied himself, and there are other things that are going on, and what can you do to try to help this kid out? Is this kid worthwhile helping? So there's that goes on too. So yeah, it's interesting.
I like that you resolve the issues, which is really good. You resolve the problems that are going on and what happens when you do this. I also wrote a young adult book about bullying, and it might have been too much for some people, I don't know, but I added the humor, I added the, the fun parts as well, the little bit of romance there. But no, you have to come up with resolutions, I think, if you're going to do something like bullying.
Which was the title of that book, Rita?
Twin Disasters.
Twin Disasters.
And folks, I'm going to remind you that we have on the bottom of the show and on the description here on YouTube, we will have the websites. And I don't have Rita's website, but Rita, if you will send it to me, and after we finish the show, I'll tell you how. And Gretchen, if you'll send me yours, and Ellen, yours, and we'll have this. You can get to the websites and find the books. I did want to go back to one thing you were mentioning, Ellen, about your books that I really love, activities. And I think there's nothing makes a book more interesting to a young kid than having the opportunity to do something, so that it isn't just listening and reading, but it's also doing things. And whether it's breaking a code or making a recipe or doing a science experiment, things that really help make the idea of a book much more interesting to a young kid. So I want to point that out to our listeners. Unfortunately, folks, as you know, my policy is to read every book that we discuss. I never met Gretchen before today, nor Rita. I haven't had a chance to read their books. I hope that I will get a chance. I hope that I will get a chance to have them back on to Writings, Chats, and Friends, because our goal is constantly to enlarge not only our audience, but our group of friends. And I know Monica would join me in inviting both of you to keep in touch with us, and let's get you back on after we've had a chance to read your books. Now, Tim, do you have anything you'd like to say to sum up, because we're about out of time, and I always like to give Tim the last word, because if I don't, I know I'll hear about it.
Who, me? I never say anything bad. Oh, well, maybe a little sometimes. I'm a good friend of Frankie's.
Yes, I know you're a good friend of Frankie's.
Yes, yes. I would swim with him, but I get too wet. I don't like wet.
I wouldn't think you did.
No. So, I'm very pleased to be here, learn lots and lots of things about children and reading, and parents should spend more time reading with their children. Good for everybody.
Yes, one of the best things about parents reading with their children, Tim,
No, what is it?
it keeps the parents out of trouble.
Yes, it does.
I'm tired of being out of trouble. And my grandchildren are not forced to, but the older ones especially, have to spend at least a half an hour a night reading. And they're like into sports. They're very tired. It's go, go, go their whole lives, but they do have to read.
I knew that we did a really good job when Saturday morning, when the kids could have been downstairs watching TV, they were hiding in their bedrooms, snuggled up with a book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, yeah. And we didn't force it. We just always read ourselves, and I think that makes a big difference too.
And I'm going to take.
Have to read Captain Underpants. No, seriously, I hate it.
I just am going to point out to you, all of you and all our listeners, that the world of books is a wonderful, wonderful world. And the world of children is a wonderful, wonderful world. And the intersection between them is what we've been talking about today, the intersection of those two wonderful worlds. And please, folks, if you're listening to this show, subscribe to Writing Chats and Friends on YouTube, here on YouTube. And that way, two things will happen. YouTube will notice us and we'll get better known. Yay! And the other thing that will happen is that you'll get notified when all our shows come up, because we do one every week pretty much, and it's on Sundays, of course, is our premiere of the show, and then it's up forever. And we're hoping that our great guests will share that link with you, but also that you'll then go on and share it with other people, so that we keep growing and because we do try and talk about stuff that does matter here. Ellen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Kenneth.
Thank you, Ken.
Oh, thank you, Tim. Gretchen, thank you for joining us. And
Thank you.
it's really great to meet you. And Rita, thank you for joining us. And it's really wonderful to have met you. And please do get back to me so we can get your information up. And I'm going to stop the recording in a second. Okay? So long, folks.